what I'm going to start off with is a rather strange photograph of me on a bus, which I get teased about a great deal, as you can imagine. I had a text from the university chaplain saying, "I've just seen your bus. It says, not in service," whatever can this mean. A lot of these messages. But what I really want to go back to is further in my own life history to when I was a drum majorette. For a number of rags when I was a student. Now, marching is actually extremely easy, as I found then, even if you're wearing a cardboard hat, a mini skirt, and you're having to do twiddly things and high kicks at the same time. Now, why is this relevant? I can see you worrying. Well, some years ago, when I was the Equal Opportunities Commissioner for Wales, I was invited by the Minister of Defence to go and watch 2 aeroplanes refuel in mid-air from the Prime Minister's aeroplane. Why? This was because they'd upset the EOC by firing a general who had got herself pregnant when the legislation said you weren't supposed to do that. Now, I obviously mugged up on the position of women in the armed services before I went, and I discovered that they have a common 6-week recruitment and training program where women actually, because they were so keen to be in the armed services, although there were fewer of them, outperform the men in every single challenge and task they were faced, except the marching. Now, I didn't understand this because I can march, I can show you. At the marching, what they found was that after a number of weeks, many of the women got pelvic inflammation, and some of them actually had pelvic dislocation as a consequence of 2 hours of marching every single morning. So being an ACE researcher, obviously I try and find out, well, what's going on here? Why can't these women march? I can march. And I found the answer in the Lancet. And the reason is because the regulation stride length when you're marching in the armed services is the same, whether you're male, female, tall or short. So for every stride, the women were overstriding a little bit. If you do that for 2 hours a day for 6 weeks, it does terrible things to your hip, as it would do to a short man. Now, the point of all about this is, nobody was thinking, ooh, let's discriminate against women, let's send lots of them to hospital with dislocated pelvises. Oh no, it was simply that the rules were made up by a group of people with a particular group of people in mind. It's as simple as that. And unfortunately, this is quite often what happens in our research. Now, Londa Schiebinger, who some of you will know from Stanford University, who I saw in Brussels this week, has talked about universities and equality, in particular gender equality, in 3 different headings. Fix the women, fix the institutions, fix the knowledge. Now, fix the women, this really started back in the 80s. Why won't women become engineers, etc., all those special schemes to try and get women to go into academic life. And it was really about, to a certain extent, a deficit model of women. There's something wrong with women, we must try and fix them. Now, there's still room for this focus on women to get them more confident and so on and so on, and I would see the Aurora program really focusing on women's leadership needs, leadership development needs in that way. After focusing on the women, it became clear that actually universities themselves needed some attention in this way. It was something about the culture, something about the way in which universities were organised, that really needed attention. And I would put the Athena Swan initiative that we have in the UK under that heading. It invites departments and universities to reflect upon the statistics and to think about the way in which things are organised that may actually contribute to the terrible gender divide that we see, particularly in some departments and at senior levels. But I don't want to talk about either of those things. I want to talk about fixing the knowledge, and that is the way in which we produce research that we think is excellent and is deemed to be excellent, but actually is faulty and can be dangerous because it ignores the gender dimension. So fixing the knowledge. I just picked this up in the Vienna Medical School. It was charming. It's used as a wax model used to train medical students in the last century. And you can see this wax model, beautiful woman, is showing her insides for the medical students to analyse and take bits out, put them back together again, I suppose. but she's wearing long blonde hair and still wearing her pearls. I just think it's so charming a part of the university curriculum. But what I want to draw attention to is the way a great number of research projects ignore the sex and gender dimension. We know that human bodies are similar in many ways, but there are also differences in the sex. And this just shows you the number of journal articles in a whole range of science disciplines where it is either unclear what the sex is of the people who have participated in the clinical trials that's led to the outcome that's being published, or you can see they are simply male. There are very few tests that are done really just on women. Well, does that matter? Does it matter if you're doing a donation of stem cells, for example, or a body part from one body to another? Does the sex of that body matter? Well, actually, the research is beginning to show, yes, it does. That the result of all of this is that women actually receive a less evidence-based medicine than men. In America, a few years ago, 10 products had to be removed from pharmacy shelves because they'd been tested on men, prescribed to women, and some women had died as a consequence. You'll know very well, I'm sure, the idea that people of a mature persuasion should take an aspirin a day to keep heart disease away. That's based on clinical trials of 27,000 people. So obviously that's a very robust finding. Lots of GPs will mention that to their patients. Those 27,000 people were all men. Heart disease in women is actually different. If you're a woman, you don't get the keel-over kind of heart disease that we see in films. You get more of something kind of irritating around here. We don't recognise heart disease in women in the same way. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of examples of this. So it's extraordinary, really, I find, that medical scientists are so careful in controlling the variables, but they have a complete blind spot as far as sex and gender is concerned. But it isn't just that, it's the engineers when they design new cars, and they will put a cadaver or a dummy in the car, crash it against the wall to make sure the airbags and seat belts and so on all work adequately. They've only very, very recently started using female bodies. That's why women in car accidents are much, much more likely to suffer from whiplash than men are. It's why women always have the seat belt in inconvenient places, and it's why women have to have the seats right up against the steering wheel in a rather peculiar way in order to be able to reach the pedals. Julie, I'm sure you're with me. So, there are endless examples in all kinds of research, not just engineering, not just medicine, that show this. But it also means that men miss out, for example, on an early diagnosis of female conditions, breast cancer. Men with breast cancer will be prescribed tamoxifen. They can be told, this has never been tested on men, good luck. Good luck is not really a word you want to hear in evidence-based medicine. Sometimes assumptions are made on the basis of sex and gender inappropriately. Many of my friends, and probably myself in the future, will have to have a new knee. Well, if you go to the hospital and have a new knee, apparently there are two drawers, men's knees, women's knees, and they simply get out the appropriate one. Whereas actually they should be looking at the height of the person, and they should be judging which false knee they put in according to the height. So you can oversimplify this as well. Now, fortunately, there's a way forward on all of this. The European Commission has produced a roadmap which is about enhancing excellence in research. I have to say I'm one of the co-authors of this report, but they are using this to inform the design of Horizon 2020 and the European Research Council, both of whom are huge sources of research funding for us here in the UK. In fact, the UK comes top of all the countries in the EU for being successful in getting money from the European Research Council. They're not all Brits, I have to say, most of them international scholars who happen to be at UK universities, but that's by the way. So one of the major funders is really looking at this. But there's a website that I want to draw to your attention, Gendered Innovations. This has been funded and set up by the European Commission and these other organisations. And this is Londa Shebinger's site, where she shows it's not simply a bad thing to ignore sex and gender when it can be so important in producing excellence in research where the results can be applied to the general public. But you can be missing out on unique inputs into the design of the research and the analysis if you ignore that input. So she's arguing, for example, for a much better gender balance on research teams, but she's also on her website, which I'll show you. This is an extraordinary website. You can see the headings here of environment, engineering, health and medicine, science. Endless, endless, endless examples from stem cells to solar panels to climate change, all sorts of things that you might have said, well, what's that got to do with sex and gender? If you get into this website, these are examples that have been collected from all over the world as examples of excellence that have been enhanced, where the research has been enhanced by taking account. Now, part of this is really important because if you don't do this, you can waste research money. You can do all these clinical trials on animals or on people, and you can't explain why there's one example here of all the male mice died. And it was because the stem cells they'd had put into them had come from females, and it doesn't work. But we kind of need to know and understand that, not say, well, we don't know why those mice died. So this website is absolutely critical, and it's my view that every researcher in the UK should be exposed to this and really refer to it when they are designing their research projects, when they're evaluating research projects and so on. Now, these are the research funding bodies that are now insisting in their guidelines to applicants and into their reviewers that you must pay attention to sex and gender. And as you can see, this is quite a lot of research councils, of governments that said anything that we as a government fund has to do this. The US, you can see a range of different European countries there. Is there a UK body there? Complete silence. We don't know about it, we ignore it. Now, journals are beginning to say, right, when you submit things, we want you to report on the implication of sex and gender for your research. 25 other journals, they're growing all the time. 5 of us wrote to the Lancet and said, we can't help noticing, as a UK-based journal, how old-fashioned you are with not paying attention to this. They published the letter and they have changed their guidelines. So this is something that is really coming. So we need to fix the knowledge. The organisational cultural change for universities, it seems to me, is to start at the beginning, start in the curriculum. 2 quick things to mention here. Trinity St David, respect for what you have done on sustainability, for your Inspire project, where you've looked at the curriculum with Jane Davidson, I know, helping, supporting and nagging, to ensure that sustainability elements are built into your entire curriculum, because your graduates, like everybody's graduates, will be out in the world where far more attention will be paid to sustainable issues in the future. Fantastic. We need to do that for sex and gender. I was in the University of Leuven last week, where they have an optional, a module that anybody from any course can go to as an elective in the evenings. There were over 200 students there, and the module is on gender mainstreaming, and I was asked to talk about this sort of stuff to them. And I challenged the students. I said, think about what you're being taught at the moment, the lectures you've been to today. Do you see any ways in which sex and gender wasn't mentioned, should have been mentioned, could have been mentioned? Big silence, embarrassing moment. And then they started to come up with the examples. And they've gone out of there feisty and challenging, a bit like the economics students are now. Why didn't you tell us the recession was coming? And now after the recession, why aren't you mentioning the recession in any of your lectures? You're carrying on as if it's never happened. Students themselves need to challenge the curriculum in this way, but really we need to take the initiative. We need to train the researchers and attach gender experts to research projects. We need to train the reviewers, the internal peer reviewers for our bids before they go out to the funding bodies. And I would say we need to use the attention paid to this as a criterion in recruiting and promoting staff. When we look at their research, are they doing this properly? If not, They could end up killing people by producing research results that have terrible consequences. They could end up wasting research money. They could do all kinds of things that are not desirable when we're talking about promoting excellence in research. So that's all I had to say, really, I think, about that. And we have probably got time for a moment of questions or points, if you would like to. But basically, this is a very important agenda. That's what I'm trying to say. Yes, Catherine.
Thank you, that was fascinating. Maybe I'm missing the point, but can you explain to me what you see as the difference between sex and gender?
Yes. Sex is what you're born as it were. And gender is what the society that we live in deems to be appropriate in terms of behaviour, what you wear, and so on. So in some things, some of the biological stuff, the medical research, it is your sex that's really, really important. But in other things, suppose you're designing a transport scheme, we know from research that men and women go about their lives in very different ways. Men have something to do, so they go off and they get it and they come back again. Women have a number of things to do, and so they arrange a sequence of different, while I'm there I'll get this and then I'll just pop in there. Am I right or am I right? Yes, okay. There's lots of empirical evidence that suggests this is true. There are all sorts of ways in which gendered patterns of behaviour and the expectations that we have of how people will behave are gendered. And therefore we have to take those into account as well as the bodily bits. Yes?
I was wondering, Teresa, about the whole aspect of curriculum, which is my area. I mean, the whole agenda you talk about sustainability has been a challenge, you know, getting our historians and our English language experts to recognise it is part of their curriculum has always been a challenge.
Yes.
And I can see that too. Now, you focused on the sciences coming from your own background. What about the humanities and social sciences in respect of sex and gender in the curriculum?
Absolutely. I think this applies to every single area. I think the focus in the Gendered Innovations website and in the critiques has been more on the medicine and the engineering, and that's partly because, frankly, they're the worst offenders. There are more women in the arts and humanities and social sciences that may partly explain a more diverse range of experiences and views coming to the research table, but obviously one has to avoid the trap of biological essentialism. You know, it is about your experience and what you've learned. You're not born with these particular attitudes. But there are loads and loads of examples in gendered innovations for arts, humanities and social sciences as well. So really, for me, it's the entire curriculum. And it's parts of the curriculum that you wouldn't even think that this would be an issue. It is extraordinary how significant it can be. Because what we're producing from research, ultimately at the end of the day, is products and services. And they are designed to be delivered and used by people. So if we're actually only designing and delivering them to be used by part of the population or to be used in a way that's not equally received, then we're in difficulties. Okay, I think we've come to a natural end. So let me just leave that thought with you, and you'll have the websites. But it seems to me this is a huge issue for research and leadership, and it's one that I know in conversations with the Leadership Foundation we have already engaged with in the research leaders programs that we've run in Wales. But it's going to need a lot more than that. It will need institutional commitment to this agenda to really make a difference. You can't expect a few researchers to sort of swim against the tide.